Hi, this is Mr. G. Welcome back to another How in the World Does He Do That type video. So it's been really interesting this last several years, sitting back and watching my progress as a composer and figuring out how to do things and being put in all these different situations, composing-wise. And what's amazing to me is that how you can take one simple melodic phrase and turn it into two totally different sounding pieces of music. I call it new school versus old school. And by old school, I mean, if I'm composing something in an old school way, my primary focus is voice leading. And it ends up sounding very polyphonic and very old school, like you would expect to hear out of early Renaissance, perhaps, or a more classical sounding piece of music. And new school, when I compose in new school, I'm thinking primarily in terms of chord progressions, moving from chord to chord. Every note is part of a chord. What's that chord? What chord is the next note part of? And do those chords make sense together? And so you work on a note to note to note chord context, chordal context. Now, when I'm doing the old school primary voice leading, sometimes I paint myself into a corner where I voice leading doesn't seem to give me the solution I want, and then I'll rely on what I know about chords. And likewise with the new school approach, in other words, chordally based, sometimes I run into some issues that the chords don't handle. It makes it a little awkward. And it's at that point where I rely on what I know about voice leading. But new school versus old school is about two different points of focus, if you will. When I'm composing an old school version, I'm thinking in terms of polyphonic voice leading, counterpoint, things of that nature. When I'm doing new school, I'm thinking a more modern version of chords, moving from chord to chord to chord. So I'm going to show you the difference. We're going to start with let me turn my volume up here so we make sure we can hear it. All right. We're going to start with a Cantus Firmus that I wrote for my course, from the Cantus to the Choir. And we're going to start off, I'm just going to show you this Cantus Firmus, and then I'm going to show you how it ended up sounding using a old school first, and then a new school approach second. Here's the Cantus Firmus. So there you are, a Cantus Firmus that I wrote using some basic rules that I found in a book called Counterpoint in Composition by Salzer and Schachter. And there's some rules that you follow to write a good Cantus Firmus. That's all in my course. So anyway, I will start with something like this. Now, if somebody wants an old school vibe, or if I want to do an orchestral piece using this Cantus Firmus as a foundation, you might end up with something that looks a little bit like this and sounds a little bit like this. This is the old school, where voice leading is my primary consideration and chords are only secondary. All right, let's hear. Let me start right here. our primary consideration here with what we did was a melodic phrase within each one of the parts that you see, 4 parts. And this form, for me, lends itself very well to an orchestral setting. Now, I've got voices oohing and awing, but I would probably see something like this in an orchestral setting. And you have this melody, and then you have the alto doing a response. If you call this a call, measure 1 a call, the alto responds in measure 2, right? And I'm having the alto do the same thing that the soprano did, just an octave lower. Let's listen to that part again. And then I have a call and response between men and women. Here I use my chords. And then I go to the next part where I have call in the soprano, response in the alto. And then you have call and response, men responding to the women. Does that make sense? Now, that's old school. New school, think in terms of a chorale or a hymn. I decide where chords are your primary concern. I took this same cantus and it transformed into this melody that you're about to see, and every note is part of a chord. And when chords are your emphasis, a totally different sound comes out. And believe it or not, these are both from the same Cantus Firmus. Well, there you have it. New school, old school. New school, chordal progressions are my point of reference, and old school, polyphonic voice leading is my point of reference. And it amazes me how 2 completely different pieces of music appeared from one Cantus Firmus, depending on my framework that I decided to use. Now, if I had decided to use jazz as my framework, or perhaps a pop rock point of reference, again, something totally different would have emerged. I find that fascinating. Now, what I just showed you here in this short little video, you will get in detail in my course from the cantus to the chorus, which I hope to have available by the end of summer. I'm slaving away on it as we speak, and between health concerns and this pandemic, it slowed me up a little bit, but I'm back on track. If you have any questions at all, go to my website, www.emergingcomposer.com, and you can email me at page@emergingcomposer.com. Go to the website to keep up with the latest blog posts and information on my virtual choir, Cantus Veritas. And stay tuned. I am hoping to release this course for sale by the end of summer. Mr. G out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.